Okay, Perry, is now a really good time to buy in Fife?
Well,
This is the $64 million question, isn't it?
absolutely.
Is now a really good time to buy in Fife? This is a question comes up with many people asking right now. The answer depends on your certain circumstances. I mean, a lot of people don't realise that, but it really does come down to that. I mean, I pride myself on the ability to provide objective, fact-based information on the Fife property market, so potential house sellers, landlords and buyers can make the best decisions for themselves. Our role is really to educate the potential Fife house sellers, landlords and buyers to provide them with the best possible information available, not to convince you out there to do something you don't want to do. To answer the big question, and the title, which we just said right now, is now a good time to buy a Fife home? Well, it comes down to three things, really. How much will you get for your Fife home when you sell it? How much will you have to pay for your new home? Probably the final one for me is how much will the move cost you in ongoing monthly mortgage payments? So to answer points 1 and 2 correctly, we need to address point 3, which relates to interest rates. The announcement is going to be made, is it tomorrow? No.
Tomorrow, yeah.
Autumn budget. Is it the interest rates tomorrow as well as the autumn budget?
I think it's
coinciding all at the same time. Yep. I mean, clickbait newspapers, websites, they're all pushing messages to potential sellers and buyers toward the top end of the sensationalized scale. It's like, oh my God, the world's falling in. It's like, I've just sent you an article the other night on the tax and the autumn statement. They're all predicting what the autumn statement's going to be before the autumn statement's actually said. It's like, how is that possible? It's like there's only one scenario that could actually happen for the autumn statement, and it's what Jeremy Hunt actually says tomorrow. I prefer to define what's actually happening. In other words, the reality of the situation. Mm-hmm. On the face of it, it doesn't look good. I mean, look at the 5-year fixed rate average mortgage has risen from 2.11% at the beginning of January this year to 6.21% in early November. Just to put that into context for you, here's a wee graph I made earlier, as it says Blue Peter. You know, it's my Blue Peter training here.
Dip.
Could have been a presenter. I could have been a presenter. You're too late. You're too old now, pal. But really, that's where it is right now, isn't it? It's, you know, if you look back, this actually zooms in. I'll zoom in there, and you can see that. See, that goes right back to March 2000. Yeah. So that's March 2000 where it was. And then obviously we had the situation with the pandemic, and then interest rates dropped. The 5-year fixed rate mortgages, they dropped like a stone. And then they're obviously back up because base rates have actually gone up and swap rates have actually gone up because of the Liz Truss scenario. You know, what's your thoughts? You know, what's your thoughts on this, Perry? You know, the Bank of England increasing base rates and stuff like that. You want to cover something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think what was interesting about that graph, Jim, was that where we were at the start of that March 2020 is kind of where we are now. So actually, is it such a big headline that they say? I think that it's been that we've enjoyed really low rates for the last 2 years. I guess if anybody's tied into that, it's not a major issue for them, isn't it? But it's interesting just to point that out that actually we're at what we were. But yeah, by the by,
I think full circle kind of thing.
Sorry?
It's a full circle kind of thing.
Well, it is, absolutely. It is, yeah, even though the Bank of England increased the base rates by 0.75 on the 3rd of November, the average 5-year fixed rate mortgage dropped by 0.22% between the 3rd week in October and bonfire night, according to the stats that we've looked at. So there are still good options out there. It's not always that you're only going to get that main headline, is it?
Yeah, absolutely. Richard, what's your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, as interest rates go up and mortgage rates are coming down, even though the interest rates are projected to increase about 4.5% by autumn 2023, which is obviously where we are. But it's interesting. So, why did
Where
the
we are, that's next year, autumn 2023.
sorry, but where we are now, next year, I meant to say. Where we are now, next year. Yeah, but it's interesting. So, why did the Bank of England mention the first week of November that the UK is facing a 2-year recession?
That's what I didn't understand. Why would they say that? Some might think it's actually controversial, yet the Bank of England wants a recession as it will aid in reducing inflation. I mean, it's plain and simple as that, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it is. And you'll see obviously the headlines with inflation this morning.
Well, notice they're only talking about food inflation, though.
Yeah.
They don't want to talk about the headline inflation because the headline inflation is still quite low in comparison to where we thought it was going to be. But they want to talk about food inflation now because the food inflation is actually astronomical where it was. Now, to be honest, food inflation almost 2 or 3 weeks ago was actually predicted at 17%. But they're saying this morning it's actually at 16.5%. So can I read out of that and be pretty bullish about the whole situation? Say, that's actually less than what we thought.
Mm-hmm.
Even though it's a lot, it's still less than what we thought. So again, the scaremongers are out there, fast and thick and fast, aren't they?
I think they certainly seem to be over predicting in regards to percentages, and we all seem to come under that piece. But it does impact people, doesn't it? And people have had to sit and kind of look at their particular circumstances.
I mean, well, that's what it comes down to. I think this is back to the Trump era, where Trump actually says something on social media and everybody goes, "Oh my God, this guy's going to do it," and then they all fall in line to what he's just said, and everything corrects itself, and he's actually not done anything at all.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what a great way to do business. It's like, this is what's going to happen. This is what's going to happen. And in the next minute, everybody falls into that train of thought and they actually act like that's happened. And Trump gets his answer to his question and he's not even actually made the question in the first place. He's just actually done the veiled threat of what could happen. And I've got a funny feeling that this is kind of where the Bank of England is right now. I mean, technically, we're not in a recession. It's 2 periods of negative growth. We've had 1 period just passed now on a quarter, which is 0.1% of negative growth. Really? To me, that's just like, that's spinning wheels. That's where you are right now. That's nothing to worry about as far as I'm concerned. But they seem to be thinking, oh my God, it's the prelude to a recession. And fair enough. If it is the prelude to a recession, fair enough. But should we really be getting out of context in terms of negative 0.1%? GDP growth or negative GDP growth. It's like, I wouldn't be worried about that if I was a business. And I was saying, my business is heading for recession, right? And then the next minute, the sales figures come in and say, well, actually, compared to last year or last quarter, you're only down 0.1%. Brass band. It's like I have to get the brass band. Your beauty. I'm only down 0.1% on my sales. I thought it was going to be catastrophic, wouldn't you? You'd be blowing trumpets and you get the trombone, you'd be up and down the street. Your brass band and your drum kit and everything, wouldn't you?
You would. I think it is that, isn't it? And it's what we always talk about, is the big headlines. But when you actually break it down, what does it mean for you as an individual? I think is what everyone really needs to appreciate and fully understand, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so as well. It's instead of relying purely on interest rates to reduce the inflation, the Bank of England is hoping to get some more, get into some sort of, dare I say, shallow recession. So they're not actually after this. When we talk about recession, everybody's talking about, oh my God, doom and gloom, the world's falling apart tomorrow. But and that's how the media makes it. But I think they're talking about recession as in 0.1 negative growth followed by maybe 0.5 negative growth. I don't think they're actually talking about huge, actually sweeping cuts right across the board. You could interpret this by saying that Amazon today has announced 11,000 jobs going. But that's more or less in the face of automation because they realise we've got a decline in workforce. And it was actually talked about on television last night in the media. And the fact that, all these people like ourselves have actually decided, well, like me, I'm not going to talk for anybody else. Like me, are actually saying, I tell you what, I've had enough of it. I'm going to retire now instead of working the next 10 years. And they're now facing a crisis of the number of people actually available to work in the workplace. That's what the problem is.
There is a bit of that, but I think with the Amazon piece as well, again, it was a very big headline, but if you really properly listen to that, most of what was going to be occurring in regards to those redundancies were in their automated Alexa division.
Yeah.
Because they've obviously run that service now for so many years that they can afford now to make some economical choices in regards to it, because they've gone through all the pain barriers of the things that have gone wrong.
You know what the media is like. They're going to try and make a strong correlation between the two of them. The fact that the economy is maybe going into recession, and then the next minute Amazon's paying people off, and it's like, oh my God, it's like, but the two of them are actually unrelated completely.
Completely.
So time will tell over that time. So shallow recession, it will not need to increase interest rates much above the anticipated 4.5% base rates. That's what they're hoping, I think. However, whether it's interest rates or a recession, both will slow down the number of home sales in Fife and will indirectly affect Fife house prices. So, Richard, even from a buy-to-let point of view, this is the question I'd probably ask. So, will Fife house prices drop? And by how much and what money will it save you if you actually wait? So, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I've spoken recently, we've spoken in blogs and things recently about the Fife property market and the prices that have been achieved for homes, and late 2023 and early 2024 will be between about 5 and 10% lower than what we've been achieving today. So there's no point in repeating why. Obviously, a message me. Obviously, there's no point in repeating why, but you can message me and obviously speak about these previous articles. But I mean, in essence, increasing mortgage rates, inflation, and affordability will mean that the price people can pay for a Fife home will crucially be curtailed because of the factors that, like, obviously, let us assume a reduction of 10% in the Fife housing prices.
So if we have a reduction of 10% in the Fife house prices, Perry, what will actually happen? I mean, what's going on with that then?
I think before we go into the facts of it, I think what we need to remember as well when we hear that, because a lot of people maybe listening before we've gone further in the article might be going, oh my God, 10% loss. But actually, that only comes into play if you're selling. And actually, if you are selling and buying, whatever you buy is going to have the same reduction. So it's a bit of an equilibrium. But no need to get a panic in that big statement.
Again, I've just called out the media for doing this, but we're doing it as well. I tell you what, though, I'm doing it. The reason that we're doing this, is to point out the possibility that you should potentially buy now and not wait for this to happen, to drop by 10%, because you could, and this is actually to demonstrate that you could end up losing out. I mean, around 8 to 1 and 100 existing homeowners are actually buyers. Now, when they sell a home, they always move up market, more than likely, regarding accommodation and location. Hence, they'll pay more for their home when they buy the property they sell. So, just bear with me, if you're in Fife and you live in a 2-bed house, well, the average price for a 2-bed house in Fife is round about 150,000. And if you want to buy a 3-bed house, it's round about the 200,000 mark. So it's a difference between the both, about £50,000. So if Fife house prices drop by 10% in a couple of years, the 150,000 2-bedroom house would drop to 135,000 or thereabouts, and the 200,000 3-bedroom house would drop to around about 180,000 thereabouts, meaning the gap would actually drop to about 44,000, thus saving the home buyer £5,000. Okay, so should they actually wait then, Perry?
Well, yes, until you look at the monthly ongoing mortgage payments. I think you've got to take that into account. So assuming a Fife homeowner has pardon?
Tell me more.
Well, exactly. I mean, assuming a Fife homeowner has an existing mortgage of 100,000, say, and added the difference of moving up the property ladder that we've just discussed. If a Fife home moved now, the mortgage payments would be £786.97 a month, assuming a 35-year deal and a 5-year fixed rate. So there is a saving there. The other scenario would be if a Fife buyer waited a couple of years for Fife house prices to drop by 10%, they would save 4,945, as we've already mentioned,
to make the move,
make a move.
£5,000.
Yeah, so they're saving about £5,000 to make that move. I mean, everyone acknowledges that interest rates will rise in the next 2 years. I think everyone's expecting that and anticipating that to kind of fluctuate within certain boundaries. So the monthly mortgage payments, when they move, even though they're borrowing less, potentially, would be £942.50 and compared to that £786.97. Based on a 5-year
now that's because the current fixed rate mortgage deal with First Direct right now is 5.34%.
Yeah.
And if everybody's assuming that interest rates are going to go up, which we're talking about, then it's more than likely the 5-year fixed rate mortgage will move up to 7.19%.
Exactly.
And that's why the mortgage payments will be more. So waiting 2 years, it will cost a Fife homeowner £155.53 extra per month, only in interest payments, or £9,331.77 over a 5-year mortgage term. See how that's working? Yeah. We're now costing almost £10,000 more by actually, because we've waited, but we're actually benefiting from a £5,000 reduction in house price. So we're still £5,000 worse off. And if we bought now, would be £5,000 worse off. So the answer to that is all about, the point is, then I would say, is because interest rates are forecast to go higher over the next couple of years, this provides potential Fife buyers with the prospect of locking in their monthly housing expenses now.
Mm-hmm.
By buying now, it hedges against the rising interest rates. Consequently, your monthly mortgage payments are going to be higher. It offers an opportunity through remortgaging to lower your mortgage costs should interest rates fall as well. So what about first-time buyers then?
Well, first-time buyers, I mean, even if we looked at house prices dropping by 18% over the 2-year period, if you look back to 1988 house price crash, the market dropped by 20% and 17% in the 2008 crash.
Yep.
The savings made on the purchase price were blown out of the water with the 2 extra years of rental payments.
Yeah.
So, the higher the deposit and higher interest rates come into play. So if you're a first-time buyer, you think, oh, actually, I'm going to wait a year or two, then for that year or two, you're going to be paying your rent payments, which means you probably aren't saving as much as you'd like to save, which means you're not going to get the deposit potentially that you're hoping for. Plus, interest rates are going to go up, which will outweigh actually any drop in the house price, which overall means it's going to cost you more money.
Yeah. By waiting. So the actual crisis in the property market today is the rocket in rental rates, Richard.
Yeah, I was just going to say, obviously, mortgage rates and interest rates are important, but the crisis here is property market today has a rocket in rental rate, and whilst a fixed rate mortgage locks your monthly housing costs, rental rates are rocketing upwards, and we've seen that progressively over the last year.
Now, I would challenge you and say, oh, but there's a freeze on rental prices, but you would say,
but that's only on
relet.
Yeah, that's only on existing tenancies. If you're reletting a property, or the property becomes vacant and you're putting it back in the market, you could then realign that with what the market's predicting at the rental levels. And a tenant today can realistically expect higher monthly costs in the coming, obviously, few years with utilities and things as well. There's going to be a lot added into that. So though most of the press generally focuses on the monetary aspects of buying a home, there are also choices of ownership that are not exclusively based on financial decisions as well.
Yeah. So why is anybody considering buying a Fife home then? Why would they? Perry?
Well, yeah, you could get that, Perry.
I mean, for me, everyone's got varying reasons for why they would do that. Buying a Fife home is a very personal, predominantly driven by your life's events, isn't it? What's going on in your world. They could be varying things. It could be divorce, marriage, separation. It could be your job's changing, you need to move. It could be you've got an extended family come along, maybe you've got another child come along and you just don't have the living space to be able to do that. Could be elderly people as well, though, moving. There could be, they need one level living, they don't have that in their current property, no room to kind of manoeuvre that. So there's a lot of different factors come into play why somebody drives it. And dare I say it, those factors could be imminent and important and need decisions now. So those types of people are just not going to be able to wait, because those things don't wait. Baby doesn't decide, oh, I'll wait another year and come along. The elderly don't decide that actually now I am able, you know. So there's lots of reasons why people do that, and they often influence the drive and the decisions that they make, whether or not to buy or sell. And really, the timing of what's going on in their world dictates that it's now, or it's next month, or it's in 6 months, isn't it?
Yeah. It's everybody. I mean, I would argue then, you know, I know they often influence, but I think it influences everything. I think it's every single time exactly the things that you've actually said right now actually influence everything. And the difficulty and the pressure that people put themselves under is to hold off and hold off and hold off, because they think they're actually going to make money or save money by actually holding off to see if the market drops. And it's like what I say about investing in shares and stocks. If the price is right for you right now, and it makes economic sense for you to go right now and do what you're doing, then do it now, because anything else is just speculation and gambling almost. So, you know, what happened, and I keep saying it myself, everybody's predicting that house prices are actually potentially going to align about 4 to 10%, you know, lower next year and the year after. However, look at what happened in the pandemic when it came in. House prices are going to crash, and it's like, boom. And here we are 2 years later at 25% increase in house prices. What happens if that happens again? Especially the one thing I noticed myself is the multiplier, and I keep going on about it all the time, and I can't emphasize it enough. The average salary in Fife compared to the average house price in Fife is around about 5.5 to 6 times. Now, and that is 5.5 to 6 times. That is typically in a boom economy all the time. And it's usually when it gets to about 9 times, that's when you find the economy usually starts to dip, and therefore house prices usually take a dip. So in terms of the resilience of the Fife property market, it's actually quite resilient in comparison to the rest of the UK and Scotland itself, because the rest of the UK is around about 9 times. Scotland itself is around about 6.5 to 7 times. So it still means the Scottish and the Fife market are actually pretty resilient in terms of prices. So I know we talk about overall, we think that house prices might generally drop. But again, I'm coming back to being pretty bullish about the whole thing and actually thinking, I have a sneaking suspicion it's actually going to stabilise and going to stay where it is, if not just slightly move up.
So, Jim, you're talking there about 6 times, 9 times. You know, if someone's listening to the podcast, is that like, in real terms to a person, what does that mean?
Okay, so there's a benchmark in the economic terms, in terms of house prices. And you know, when you're in a healthy house price environment, when the average salary in the area, which is in Fife, it's around about 31,000. This is where everybody goes, I'm going 31,000.
Average.
Average. There's people above, there's people below, and there's people in the middle. So, and it depends on obviously your skills, your skill set, and that, whether you actually are the average. But that's the average. But it's a benchmark that they use, and then they take the average house price in Fife, or average house price in Scotland, or average house price in Britain, and then they divide one by the other. So the average salary into the average house price in Fife goes round about 5.5 times, because the average house price in Fife is, I think it's round about 180,000. So if you take 180,000 off the top of my head, well, in a calculator, I always use that. Typical accountant, 18000, and divide it by 31, 123. Yeah, you're getting 5.8. So 180,000. It's not quite 180,000. It's a bit below that, a couple of thousand below. So you're getting 5.8 times the average salary goes into the average house price in Fife. Therefore, it tells us, and we know by track record on all the history of the house prices since 1984, that the average multiplier, if it's round about 6 times or 5.5 times, it's still a healthy housing market. And there's not much it can actually put that off. And this is why I talked about the last time when house prices jumped up 25%. I kept saying to everybody, but this is a natural equilibrium. This is actually the Fife house prices going to where they should be in the first place. It's not the fact they've been historically low for all that period. So we're getting it all at once. And it's the same with inflation. Inflation's been historically low, interest rates have been historically low, and it just so happens the perfect storm's appeared, and inflation and interest rates and house prices are all moving up at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to bear in mind as well that unemployment is historically low as well. And unless there's a huge shift in unemployment numbers, and I mean that, meteoric, like double at least, then I don't think there's anything to be too concerned about, because that means everybody's still in a job, everybody's still earning, everybody's still able to afford. It's all down to how we deal with inflationary pressure. But it's a matter for choice for the average person in the street to go, I tell you what, I'm not going to buy my tin of beans or my pint of milk from you anymore because you're £1.50. I can get it at Lidl's for 4 of them for £1.09. And it is, you walk with your feet. And it's unfortunate, but, some businesses will suffer because of that, because that's all they can afford. It's like your typical forecourt petrol station. Your typical forecourt petrol station independent, they only make like 5 pence off of every litre. If 5 pence is, I know some make just 2 pence or 3 pence off every litre they dispense. Hence the reason why they've got a shop and trying to sell you things when you're walking through it, because they can't stay in business with that, an independent. But you get the bigger conglomerates like Asda's and Tesco's and that. They have their own petrol, and Sainsbury's, they have their own petrol stations. They do mass bulk, and they make a fortune out of their petrol because they get they buy in bulk, like the pints of beer as well. Same with a publican. If you've got a publican with many, Lee Murray told me this once anyway. He says, it's about scale when it comes to selling beer, because you're only making a few pence off of every pint, and you need the amount of scale in order to sell the most amount of pints. But if you sell the most amount of pints, then you get at a lower cost because you're buying in bulk from the brewery. And therefore, you get a lower cost, so you're able to make a better margin on each one, minute margin. But this is what that's all about. So it's actually going to have to be that probably the supermarkets will be the ones that survive, and unfortunately, it's probably the independents that will suffer the most. So if you can, at times, then please shop independent. Get your independent local business, buy it from them. It may cost you a few pence more, but instead of having to travel all the way down to Sainsbury's or do your Sunday shop or whatever it is and go somewhere else, it's maybe a lot easier just to walk up to your shop and just do that way. You find in times of recessions as well, actually, the little independent shops actually do better, because people are on less of an income. This is bizarre how this works. In the mindset, people on less income normally think they would go to the big supermarkets and get the better deals, tend to shop in smaller bite-size amounts. So then they tend to go for the smaller independent shops, which are actually charging them more money. So you find that in times of recessions and troubled times, people actually shop from day to day in smaller amounts rather than week to week in big amounts, because they think that's the way they should be doing things, when in actual fact, it's potentially not. But it's psychology, it's human psychology, and it's how it works. The independents do better in recessions, and the wee independent corner shops, the premiers and the spars and all the rest of it. So I know I digress, but it's just telling you about how the economic situation.
It's interesting, though.
No, but I can see how that would work, though, because you would have that fear factor of going, say, on a Sunday morning and spending £100 filling a trolley, versus going on Sunday and buying a pint of milk and a loaf of bread at the wee shop.
Yeah.
And then you've got more money in your pocket, and you feel more secure. You feel safer because you've got more money in your bank. But the reality is, it's a false economy. It's like what we used to do when we had our cars when we were younger. We used to go to the petrol station for £2 worth of petrol. Okay, but you're going to run out of £2. But you're going to. I know it was a long time ago. That was a gallon, by the way. But the reality is, you're going to run out of that gallon anyway when you've used it. So you're just going to have to go back and buy more. But there was this mentality of, oh well, we'll just put £2 in there now, and it's a false economy.
Yeah.
So because you're going to have to eat anyway. You're going to have to travel in your car anyway. But we seem to have this inherent scarcity about us to think we need to hoard anything. We need to keep a hold of anything. And we can't afford to leave anything. And it's that fear and scarcity. It drives people down. It actually stops them from actually seeing the opportunities available in front of them to earn more money when it appears. That's what happens at times like this. People become scarce. They become fearful, and they pull resources in. And that's exactly what the Chancellor's trying to do. That's why they're doing that in the media. I wouldn't be surprised if the media has been asked to do that scaremongering tactics in order to get people to actually rein back on what they're doing, to put their money in their savings banks. I heard yesterday as well, we were watching a really good show, the politics show, actually, about this. And they said if they want more people to save, all they do is they put the national savings interest rate up. The Chancellor just goes to the Bank of England and said, go and put the national savings rate up for people. Because they were asking, it was Martin Lewis Money show last night. They were asking, how come base rates doesn't reflect the national savings rates, which is actually the government-backed bank. And they said, well, that's what it's to do with. It's only, they leave it like that now, so people spend. But when they want them to save, they just put the interest rates up a wee bit more, but not above the base rate too much in order to get people to save. And actually, that's how they. So there'll be various things that will happen tomorrow, which will in the budget. I mean, I'm maybe going to do an article about this later on if I've got time. Not got enough hours in the day though now. To talk about what the predictions could be, potentially. And how that could affect the housing market, how it could affect the local economy as well. But
so Jim, you explained about the 6 times salary, 9 times salary. Again, I'm just talking this from layman terms, someone who doesn't really understand it, or a first-time buyer who's coming out there. Why is it better to be 6 times rather than 9 times? Because when you hear that, you think 9 times is better, don't you? When actually it's not.
No, because obviously you'll need, technically in theoretical terms, then you'll need 9 times your salary to be able to afford that house.
Yeah.
You know, clearly you would obviously want as low as amount of times of your salary as possible. You can lend up, I think, now till about 4.5 times your salary. But they are, you know, and we take that as a benchmark, but we don't expect somebody to come in as a first-time buyer and borrow 6 times. No. But it's just always worked as a really good benchmark to measure the health of the housing market and
it's itself. A good indicator.
So it's that indicator that everybody's used all these years, and in times where we've got a healthy economy, in order to ascertain whether the housing market is still quite healthy. You know when you should be selling as an investor when property prices actually reach the 9 times and 10 times scenario. As average salary, because then that's more or less the peak of the market where it is. And then obviously after a period of time, average salary will move up over the years, because the average salary in the last 20 years has doubled almost.
Yeah.
So think about it. If prices were the same today, the multiplier would be at 10 or 11 times what it was 20 years ago, the average salary. So the average salary is caught up all this time, and then house prices have gone, wait a minute, this is out of kilter. And then they've actually leveled up to that 6 times again. And then what will happen is people might not buy for a wee period of time, or it might be stagnant for a wee time, but salaries will go up. See that where people putting inflationary pressure, and they're all going, we're wanting 17%, and we're wanting 15%, and we're wanting 10%, and that will go up. And then average salary will go up over the next 5 to 10 years. And then guess what? If you've got the house prices to compare to the average salary below that 6 marker, you should be buying property right now if you're an investor, because that means at some point in time that'll realign and come back to its normal equilibrium again.
Yeah.
Good, thanks. I think
Dave actually puts it quite good there. I mean, Dave actually said that we are not educated in financial awareness and cleverly misguided for the benefit of the establishment. I kind of disagree with that.
You kind of disagree with that.
Obviously, the establishment, and which is effectively the economy and the government, want you to adhere to what they want you to do. If they want you to spend less money, in an ideal world, you say, look, guys, can you just spend less money? How much less do you want us to spend? Well, we need you to spend probably less than 10% less than you'd normally spend every time. And if everybody went, yeah, that's fine, inflation would be under control by now. But we don't like that. We don't like being told what we need to do. We don't like following orders. So what happens is they go, you're not going to listen to us, so we're going to put indirect taxation and also stealth taxes in to stop you actually spending, and curtailing you in terms of what you do spend, and that will bring inflation down. So we all point to the government and saying it's your fault inflation's gone up, but we've only got ourselves to blame. We're the ones spending the money.
Yeah.
We're the ones asking for more money. We're the ones producing more money. So I hate to say it, but the buck stops at the person actually spending the money. It's us. It's us, but we don't want to do that. We just want to blame someone else. It's a pantomime game. The government's a pantomime game. That's it. So That's that's kind of a mini course on how everything works and how it affects the housing market. Home ownership's always been a foundation, though, and a stone of the British dream. A foundation stone of the British dream. It always has been, and we've always been taught that. Now, I don't buy into that, to be honest. I think home ownership should be for the people that actually it suits them. It shouldn't be an immediate desire. It should be based on your circumstances. Because for some people, home ownership doesn't make sense at all. If you're going to be in a housing market or in an area for 2 years, the last thing you're going to be doing is buying a home, because you've got the entry costs, you've got the exit costs, and then you've not even got guarantee that you're going to be out at the right price. You might actually the market might drop. You might even get your house sold, and in that time as well, because you've owned it, you're paying all the cost to repair it and improve it.
Yeah.
And then equally, is like what you said, Richard, is if you rent it, it's like your exit cost and your entry cost is nothing.
Mm-hmm.
It's moving. That's it. You're not paying fees or getting mortgages. You can walk away anytime you want within 28 days notice. And sometimes you don't even need to buy your own furniture, and somebody else is footing the bill for all the repairs on the house.
Yeah,
What an easy game.
Home ownership is something that has kind of, a lot of people strive towards it, and it's because it's kind of drummed into us all, like home ownership. But really, it's not really that suitable for everybody, and depending on individual circumstances, potentially, and a lot of the time, renting's a better option.
Renting, yeah, and you just need to look to Europe to see that.
Yeah,
you've got Germany, you've got Sweden, you've got Switzerland, you've got all these places. They mainly rent in the areas. Even America rents more than us. Did you know at the height of the 50s, the UK housing stock, rental housing stock, all tenures was 60% of the housing market. 60% of housing stock was actually rented in the 1950s. Now you'll be lucky if it's between 15 and 20%.
I was just going to say about 20.
And still people think that's too much. That again. Again, it doesn't make sense for everybody. There's this scenario about if you buy a house, you'll have money. No, you won't. The next person will have money because you'll have to die first before you get it, because you'll still need somewhere to stay.
Mm-hmm.
So the house that you live in, you'll never get any money out of until the day you die, unless you sell it and go and rent. That's the only way you'll release money. Or unless you get an equity release, then it'll cost you money to do that, and interest payments.
That'll cost you to do that.
So all you're doing is sinking your money into what is effectively. I shouldn't be arguing about home ownership. I'm just like, wait a minute, I'm on a show about home ownership, and I'm talking people like that.
But you're speaking as a landlord and an investor, Jim. So you can
I'm definitely looking at a point of view that most people want to own their home, and I don't see anything wrong with that. Okay? No. But what I'm saying is, if you point it out and straight, and I'd be honest about it, you look at it and think to yourself, you're never going to see that money anyway if you own the house. But that doesn't mean to say, I mean, I've said it before, and you know it yourself, I've bought my next house to rent.
Yeah.
So I don't own it. My children don't own it, and I'll rent it off them. That's it, because that'll be it's an unlimited company. So I've got no intention of actually owning a house when I pop my clogs. I don't want to. I don't see the point of that. I've seen so many people own their own houses, and they talk to themselves and say, "I've not got two halfpennies stood up together." And I'm sitting saying, "You're staying in a house
that's £500,000.
Yep. And you're telling me you've got no two halfpennies stood up together." And it's like, that doesn't make sense for me. That does not compute. Why do you downsize? Oh, I didn't want to lose. Well, there you go. You didn't want to lose your existing house and your lifestyle. Well, you just told me your lifestyle's pretty pitiful as it is. So why are you downsizing? Because you've said, I can't afford to heat my house. I can't afford to pay my bills. I can't afford to have my car that I always wanted. I can't afford to get from A to B. I can't afford to feed myself and feed my kids and feed my cats and feed my dogs. And it's like, you're staying in this massive house that you don't need. Sell it, downsize, release the equity, go and enjoy yourself and have some fun. That's my point.
I see that quite a lot.
My mother and father still sit in the house right on the links. And it's probably about 750 grand, all paid for. And I'm thinking, what are you going to do with this then?
What are you going to do?
You'll get it when I go. And I'm like, you're too late. I don't need it now.
Yeah.
It's like they're giving it to the kids anyway. But the point is, and the kids won't need it either, to be honest. But my point is, why on earth would you want to do that? Most, and if anybody agrees with me, please feel free to comment in there. Yeah. Most people would want to see their parents enjoy the money they've got right now. Most children would want to see their parents They don't really want you to die to get money.
No.
They would rather you enjoyed the money and had a great time with it. I think that's my point out of that. What I'm trying to get round to is like, enjoy yourself while you've got it. You're not taking it with you. You can't take it with you. That's it. You're only going round once. You're not coming back, and it's not a dress rehearsal. So make the most of it right now. If you're definitely in a big house and you don't feel the need to keep running all the time, you need to sell it and downsize. Oh, but I'll not get the money I want for it. But you're going to buy the house at the other price as well, at the lower value. If you're saying that you're going to get lower value, you're laughing, Perry, because we do get that from people.
Yeah.
I'm holding out for another £5,000 extra. It's like, my God, I've just got you 550 grand. It's like, and you're holding out for a £5,000. I would be going now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Some people are like that. They just get it into their mind. They get it stuck in their head. It's like, no, I'm only accepting that. Okay, that was 6 months ago. So now the market's completely different now. Why are you thinking like this still? Because they've got it emblazoned into their mind and they feel it's a climb down or some embarrassing situation at the fact they're having to accept less. Hey, I tell you what, if it allows you to move on and have the quality and peace of life and the stress-free life that you always wanted, because that's really what you're after, then 5 or 10,000 less is an easy gig.
Yeah, exactly.
You
can't, and it goes back to what we said earlier on in our discussions. You're moving for circumstance. There's a reason. There is something making you do that, and sometimes that part can get lost when the process begins, isn't it? It
gets lost because we get embedded into this fact that we need this money. It's like, you don't really. I mean, how much do you need to live on? It's like, I woke up one day and thought, oh my God, how much do I really need to live on? And it's like, how much more do you need? I mean, I always say there's only so much money you need, and the rest is just for show. But who are you trying to show it off to? Probably the people that don't like you in the first place.
Anyway, house prices in Fife.
we're getting into the wealth creation show, aren't we?
That's quite wealth creation show stuff, but it's interesting, and I think it's always all relevant. So,
I mean, home ownership. What about home ownership, Perry? Then does it offer you any control?
I think it is. We've always been taught it's the dream, own your own house. And I think it stems back to what you said there about in the 50s and 60s, etc., when people always rented and then one of your relatives bought a house. And so that kind of fever starts through them, isn't it? But I think it does offer control, offers a sense of security that some people feel that renting just doesn't provide. The doom-monger headline grabbing newspapers, though, often overlook that. Non-economic factors affecting the desire for potential home buyers are kind of ignored because of that. But I think the one important thing from the last few years since the first lockdown in 2020, which I think surprised all of us, is that people still want to own their own homes. And I think that will never change. Irrelevant of what we've said there about renting, etc., people still want to own their own houses, don't they?
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, I think there is very much that there is a lot of people who still want to own their home and they still want to have their castle with, I think it's an Englishman's home is their castle type thing. But to pull up the drawbridge when they think things are going to get tough and how they get through things in a place that they want to have their family and they could call their own and actually own it. I think that's where the home ownership thing comes from, and that feeling and that attachment to a property. Never forget that home ownership is much more than the house and the prices and all the graphs and things that we look at. It's about, like I say, the Englishman's home is your castle.
A Scotsman's home is his castle.
And I was just going to say, a Scotsman's home is his castle. And I think that's where the mindset comes into it.
I think it goes a lot back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And it is the need for food and shelter as the primary need in Maslow's hierarchy. I think, and it's inherent in all our human behaviour, the fact that the need for food and shelter is an inbuilt thing, and I think that aligns with property ownership, with the fact that you've got your own house. Because if this is the thing, if you own your own, here's the mentality here: if you own your own house, you're going to be safe and secure. Well, because you don't own your own house unless you bought it for outright. The person that owns your house, if you've got a mortgage, is the bank. If you don't own it, until you pay it off. But even when you pay it off, you technically, do you own your own house? Well, you've got a financial burden. You've got a financial burden, put it that way, and you've got your money locked up in somewhere for the future at some point in time, where you might be able to release it later on in your retirement and downsize. That's, I think, where everybody thinks. The next best thing that I've heard, and I used to hear it all the time, is getting a council house, for rent. So a council house gives people more security. Now, I tell you what, Richard, I don't know if you've heard that lately, but I've not heard that in years, where people now say that, go for a council house. It'll give you more security. But I used to hear it years and years ago. Maybe
I've heard it over the years, definitely. I mean, it still gets said, but could you be hard pushed to get a council house?
Yeah, and that's it, because the council's got rid of all their houses. So people actually assume that housing associations are the council, but they're not. They're private landlords like us.
Yeah.
You see it yourself. They're doing mid-market rents now, and they're doing new builds, mid-market rents. But at some point in time, these new build mid-market rents will be older builds. They'll be second-hand homes, and they'll just be like everybody else.
Yeah.
They've only got the grace of having the luxury of having free money just now from diverted from resources that they were given for actually social housing, but they've now allocated it to mid-market housing. It's like we've paid for it. Sorry, that's what it is. The taxpayer actually paid for that. The taxpayer paid for the social housing providers to become private landlords. Let's be honest. That's it in a nutshell. And if you want more information on that, I'm quite happy to discuss that on an open forum. And actually, let's get some social housing or pretend social housing landlords to come on and actually justify their position against what I'm going to say. Let's have a good debate about it. Who's the most social landlord, me or them? I know who's going to win, but because I know exactly how they run. Anyway, the point is, people see private rented as well as not secure. And yet, in actual fact, when you look at the legislation now in place and what we've got in, it's really secure. And at the end of the day, what landlord really wants to buy a house to not have a tenant in it? That makes no sense, does it?
No.
But there's that perception out there, isn't there? That private landlords, it's not a secure tenancy. And yet it is. And I used to argue that all the time with the council. They used to go, well, you guys are you're not really secure tenancies. You want to bet? I'll keep, I'm quite happily have somebody rent the house for the rest of their life if they want. And I'll look after them. I'll give them new kitchens, new bathrooms, new heating systems, and I'll make regular maintenance on the property, and I'll do everything possible for them if they're happy to stay in it and pay the rent and look after it. Why would I know? Security of tenure.
No, I agree.
So I think that's the Englishman's home is his castle thing. I think that's how the psyche comes across. Let's remember, though, that most people in the UK have been able to build and grow their family wealth through the actual home ownership and actually through second home ownership as well. And I don't mean second home ownership as in a holiday home. What I mean, because that costs you money, a holiday home. What I mean is second home ownership as in private rented accommodation, so they can rent or do service accommodation for holiday lets. So they've seen it as that, and it is a good market to be in. That's why I like to provide the best information on the Fife property market, so you can make the best decision for yourself and your family. So, if anybody's out there and wants more information, please feel free to contact Perry or Richard at any point, or myself. More than happy to do that. Let's round up here, because I've waffled some rubbish. Even I admit that, but unfortunately, I can't get away from me. You can.
No, I think we've made some valid points, and I think that I always find these really educational when we do these, because you're not looking at one transmitted view of it in regards to what we see in headlines. You're looking at it's an open forum discussion where we can share some facts and figures. We're not any kind of advisory body. We're just giving our understanding of where things are, facts and figures wise, and directing people to the right thing. And I think that if we can do that and help people understand it better, or equip them with understanding some of the choices that they can make that impact their life, then it's worthwhile doing it, isn't it?
Yeah. Richard, what about you?
I think it goes back to what Dave said earlier about raising financial awareness and people's, obviously, educating people on the actual facts and the figures. I think obviously the topic today is it a good time for to buy a house in Fife? And I think mindset wise, people are so fixated on property prices and things, and maybe I'll hang off, but really they're not thinking about, well, let's think about mortgage and interest rates. Where are they going to be in 2 years? And if I wait, I'm going to pay the price. If I wait a couple of years rather than do it now. And that's obviously education.
They're going to have to get a mortgage at a higher rate, just as Perry said.
Yeah. So really, the answer is probably now. Obviously, some individual circumstances might be different, but it's about your financial education and awareness. So speak to the right people and make that move if it's right for you just now.
I think you're absolutely right when you said that. It really is about speaking to the right people and getting the right information. So it's actually getting someone round like yourselves just to talk to them talk it through the scenario about should they actually be moving now and how much it's going to cost them to do that versus how much it's going to cost them to move in a couple of years' time.
Yeah,
I think that's the thing because most people will actually weigh off. But when you go through the figures and go through that scenario that we've talked about now, that'll apply to mostly every single person. Mm-hmm. But we don't realize that because we don't. We sit with blinkers on and we're fed what we're fed from the media, and we don't actually think about what it'll cost us in 2 years' time if we move, based on the information that'll be in the market at that point, like the higher interest rates, possibly lower house prices. But what will that cost me in real terms as opposed to doing it right now? And then the rental, you'd have to rent in between if you were going to do that, unless you move back with your parents and live in their house. But I wouldn't suggest anybody wants to do that at 55-year-old. Hey, my mum said tomorrow you can move into my house, I'd be parked and in that door as fast as possible. Genuinely, because to me it was like I could save a fortune, because that's how I look at it. I could save a fortune, I can invest a fortune based on the savings that I make. Happy days. I didn't know how long it would last though.
I was just going to say it might not. After a few weeks you might regret that.
But you put it quite well there, Perry, and I'll show that graph again. That is actually quite interesting when you said that, and I picked up on this and through it. You said March 2000, average 5-year fixed rate deal was at 7%, and now it's actually sitting below that right now. So, and in March 2000, we were all jumping about saying, happy days, this is brilliant, before the pandemic. And the market was sitting at 1,200 properties for sale on the Fife property market. It's just under 1,000 right now. And yet mortgage, so there's less properties on than there was in March 2000 and 2000. And there's also the 5-year fixed rate deal is less than what it is in March 2000. And dare I say as well, that the average salary is a bit higher than it was in March 2000 as well.
So we're better off.
In real terms, we're actually better off. Some would say statistics, lies, damn lies, and statistics. We've heard it before, and the fact that we could take inflation on food prices and say, well, in real terms, we're not better off. But it depends if you actually eat. If you didn't eat, you'd be okay. But see what I mean? How I spun that? It's like, I tell you what, if you didn't eat and you didn't buy anything, inflation would you bother you? There you go. That's how
then obviously we'll have to eat, but then you could curb your spending.
I know.
Like we spoke about before. Do you know what I mean?
I'm being really flippant and sarcastic about the whole thing, about how the media portrays things, and actually saying it in their context, and the fact that, oh, well, if we didn't eat and we didn't have a house and we didn't spend anything, then inflation wouldn't bother us at all. We wouldn't need to worry about anything. No. But clearly,
it's this Heinz versus Lidl's thing again, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say so, and that's what it's down to. It's been smart, it's been savvy, it's making sure. It's also the most important one for me is if you think your mortgage is quite high now, you should be going to your mortgage provider and saying, I tell you what, can you extend it for a wee bit longer for the period of the mortgage? Therefore, I could pay less every month. And that less every month I'm paying right now could go to my extra shopping bill. It could go to my extra heating bill. It could go to, all these different things. It could go to my extra fuel bill. It might actually be able to cover all these things in the short term, because if you're going to go through a recession for 2 years and then it's going to be happy days in the years after that, all you need to do is survive for 2 years on cash flow. Exactly. So in order to generate cash flow, push your mortgage out for that period of time, lower the mortgage rate as a result, because the lending's getting a lot longer. Now, remember, this is advice based on what I've done before personally. But you're going to get back on track once you get after that. You make sure you're back on track after that. You discipline yourself to get back on track after that. So you're not going to pay more overall. You're just going to eat into it later on. It's like taking your temporary holiday for your mortgage. Hey, I tell you what as well, there's people out there maybe got temporary holidays still.
Yeah, you've probably got that option in your...
You can possibly take your 6-month holiday. So you can maybe take the 6-month holiday and no paying your mortgage. The banks actually might not be saying anything about that now, but it might still be available, or they might reintroduce it as a measure to help people in the short term. That could come. So check with your bank, see if you can get a holiday if you need it, because then it's the short-term cash flow you're after. If your mortgage is, for example, like what you said, Perry, there, and I'll quickly finish off, if your mortgage is almost, what, 800 quid a month, we said, on the 5-year fixed rate deal now? So if your mortgage and you got a temporary on 8 months, on £800 almost, at the 12, so 812, that's 960 quid. Is that right? No,
9,600.
Yeah.
That's 10 grand.
Yeah.
So when you think about it, if you take a 6-month holiday, there's £5,000 in cash you could use right now to spread out during the year, which would actually maybe help you actually cope with the current situation. Admittedly, it'll mount up because it'll add on to your mortgage for the end, and the bank will tell you how much that'll be. But really, in the scope of things, of being able to survive on a day-to-day basis, on a month-to-month basis, it's maybe a good scenario to use. My thoughts for the day. That's all. Just in that context, and that's it. Thanks very much for coming on the show. I appreciate it. Thanks very much for commenting, Francis and Dave. And until next time, guys, we're Fife Properties TV.
See you later.
Bye.